So it's July 4th, 2025. This is not a day to be celebrating our independence. It's a day to acknowledge the fact that we are losing our freedoms. We are losing our republic. We are losing our democracy. This is a day when we need to be honest with ourselves and realize that we're going to have to fight to get back what we've lost and what we are on the verge of completely losing altogether. To preserve what we have and to get back what we've lost. It's sort of appropriate that Donald Trump's big, beautiful piece of shit bill, which in many ways is the codification of a blueprint for tyranny, Project 2025, that was passed yesterday and is supposed to be signed today. It seems fitting and altogether appropriate that today would be Independence Day. And let us remember what it is that we are supposed to be celebrating on Independence Day. It's the Declaration of Independence that we are celebrating on this day. And I think that it would be a good time to look back on the Declaration of Independence and some of the things that it said. I'm not going to read all of this, but I'm going to read some of it. Because nearly 250 years later, it is still relevant. In fact, it is more relevant today than probably it has ever been since 1776. Now, for those of you who may never have read the Declaration of Independence or who may not have read it for a while, and by the way, after I read some of this to you, I'm going to suggest some things that we can be doing, because that's what really we need to do now. We need to both recognize the situation we're in and start talking about what we're going to do about it. Because the time for sitting around and complaining and wringing our hands is over. If we keep doing that, and only doing that, then we're going to lose it all. So I have some suggestions, just a couple, and I'm going to be offering more as time goes by. But I really want to talk about the Declaration here. Now, the Declaration of Independence is basically in two parts. The first part is laying down a set of principles and explaining how the colonists have been living or had been living under tyranny, and that their rights were being violated by the king, and that they tried everything short of declaring their independence and precipitating what they knew would be a war for their independence. They tried everything else, but they had run out of options, and that they didn't undertake this lightly. But when there is no other choice, then it is the duty of free people to throw off their oppressors and to establish new government. That's the first part, them laying that out. And the second part, they listed the reasons that compelled the Declaration itself, that compelled the separation from Britain. They said, look, when you're going to do this, when you're going to take this step to declare your independence from a nation, it is incumbent upon you to lay out your reasons specifically why you're doing it. That you shouldn't undertake such a thing lightly. For those of you who may not be all that familiar with the Declaration of Independence, or it's been a long time since you've read it, let me explain briefly. In the first part of the Declaration, they basically say that we have no other choice but to declare our independence from Britain. That we've tried everything else short of taking this step, which they knew full well would lead to a war for their independence. It wasn't going to be enough to just sign their names to a declaration, that they were going to have to fight for their independence. And they explained why it was they felt compelled to do that. And in the second part, they specifically listed their grievances, the things that the king was doing to abuse the colonists, to impose tyranny on the colonists and violate their rights. And so I want to read the first part of the declaration and then selected parts of the second. And you will see that many of the things that they were complaining about back then, Donald Trump is doing to us right now. So let me read the declaration. It begins this way. In Congress, July 4, 1776. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. They then go on to list their specific grievances, listing the things that the king had done to impose tyranny on them. Let me read a few of these and tell me if you think these sound familiar. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. Donald Trump, he doesn't need to dissolve representative houses. He doesn't need to dissolve Congress, the representatives of the people. He's already conquered them. Or actually, if we're going to be honest about it, the American people decided to nullify the Congress. Anyone who's paying attention over the last several years, nearly a decade now, should know that the Republican Party is nothing more than a personality cult in service of Donald Trump. Yet they elected that cult to control of the Congress. And so now we do not have a real representative house to represent the people of this country. Instead, we have a tool that Donald Trump uses to oppress us. Look at how he passed this bill. Many people were opposed to it, but they dare not vote against it because they are controlled by this tyrannical president. So Trump didn't have to dissolve these representative houses. He already controlled them because the American people gave him that control. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary power. He refused to allow courts to adjudicate claims under law. Well, Donald Trump is trying right now to abolish our judicial system. And when he gets rulings that he doesn't like, he simply ignores them. He attacks judges. He threatens judges. Okay? He's in the process of destroying the judicial branch right now. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. You know damn well if Donald Trump could completely control these judges, he would do so. Maybe that's the next step. Maybe Donald Trump will cut off their salaries unless they rule the way he wants them to. Would anybody be surprised if they do that at some point in time? But the point is, the King of England essentially denied the people an independent and objective judicial system. Instead, he used it to oppress the people. Exactly what Donald Trump is doing with our court system now. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. Look at what Donald Trump is doing now, using federal law enforcement to harass the American people, to abuse us, to kidnap people, to hold people with no due process. We see it every day. ICE. Now, this bill, the budget now for ICE, which has been the worst abuser of people's rights, essentially Trump's Gestapo. This big, beautiful piece of shit bill now makes the budget of ICE larger than the budgets of almost every country's military in the world. In fact, there's only like 13 militaries in the entire world that have budgets bigger than ICE in this country. And if you have been appalled by the harassment and the abuses of ICE up to this point, you ain't seen nothing yet. And not just ICE. You have Border Patrol. You have Trump using the National Guard. It's going to get a lot worse. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. Isn't Trump doing that right now? Sending the National Guard and Marines into California against the will of the California legislature and governor. Yeah. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. Well, what Donald Trump is in the process of doing is so corrupting the military that they are not faithful to their oaths of office, to the Constitution, to the American people, but rather personally loyal to Donald Trump. That's why he put at the head of the Department of Defense, Pete Hegseth, someone who is completely loyal personally to Donald Trump and will do his bidding in whatever Donald Trump wants him to do. For cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. Look at what Donald Trump has done. He declared essentially a trade war with most of the rest of the world, imposing massive tariffs. For imposing taxes on us without our consent. Again, tariffs. That's what tariffs are. They're taxes. and it's completely without our consent. It wasn't even with the pathetic Congress that we have that is supposed to be the representative of the people. Trump didn't even go through them as compelled by the Constitution for imposing tariffs. He did it on his own, illegally, unconstitutionally. Nobody voted for it. Our representatives in Congress, who are supposed to be the only ones with the power to do that, did not vote for it, imposing massive taxes on all of us without our consent, for depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of trial by jury. He's doing that right now. He's openly hostile to due process. How many people has he held without trial, sent off to third world concentration camps? And he has said, why should we give due process? We don't have time for that. They're criminals. They're criminals because I say they're criminals. And therefore, we don't need due process to determine whether they're criminals or not. I just told you that they are. So people are being held without due process, without trials. That's only going to get worse. For transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. Again, rounding up people off the streets of America and sending them off to foreign concentration camps. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized government. Again, Donald Trump sending the military and the National Guard into our communities without the consent of the governor, without consent of the legislature. He's building an internal police force to be used against the American people. ICE, with their massive budget, what do you think that's going to be used for? Just to round up criminal illegals? No, no, no. Now they're building concentration camps here. Alligator Alcatraz. Now Alaska is talking about Bear Alcatraz. This is sick. This is sick stuff. But we've seen this before in our history. Anyways, their list of grievances goes on and on. They finally say this. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. They say a bit more, but that's the general gist. I recommend you read this. You will be amazed at how much what they were complaining about back then in 1776 is happening now. And I would argue many of the things that are happening now are even worse than the injustices that they suffered back then. And things are only going to get worse here. So let us not celebrate this day, celebrate our independence. Let us recommit this day to fighting for our independence. Well, what can we do? Well, the first thing we ought to be focused on doing is winning huge majorities in the midterm elections. Assuming we have elections, but let's assume that we do. And we should fight like hell unless and until we don't have elections. But by the way, in that big, beautiful piece of shit bill, many of those provisions that hurt people the most are delayed until after the midterm elections. That's a good indication that at least the members of Congress believe that there's going to be midterm elections. Otherwise, they wouldn't give a shit. Let it go into effect right now. But they wanted to put off a lot of these things until after they are up for election again. And then 2 years after that, they don't really care because they'll figure, well, the American people won't even remember by then. But they don't want to be held accountable in this next election. We need to make sure that they are. And if we win big enough majorities in both houses of Congress and put the fear of God into the remaining Republicans who managed to stay in Congress after the midterms, then we need to impeach and remove this piece of shit and then prosecute him for his crimes. And many of the crimes that he is committing, he is not immune for. Even given that horrible decision of the Supreme Court, many of his crimes are in no way official acts of the President of the United States. They are personal acts, and he could be prosecuted for them. So that's number one. That goes without saying. What else can we do? Well, we need to be talking about this. We need to be thinking of things that we can do. But just a couple of ideas. Number one, the states need to stop taking federal money. Okay? If you understand our Constitution, and I know that's easier said than done, but hear me out. If you understand our Constitution, you would know that the federal government has very little control over the states. I know people don't think that. They think that the states are subservient to the federal government. That's not at all how it works. We have a system of federalism where the states are sovereign. They are completely different, separate, sovereign levels of government, right? The states are not subservient to the federal government. The Constitution gives the federal government limited enumerated authority. Anything that the Constitution doesn't specifically give to the federal government is retained by the states and the people. That's the 10th Amendment. The way that the federal government, and specifically this tyrannical president, exercises control over the states is by attaching conditions to the money that the federal government gives to the states and threatens to withhold it if the states don't do what they want, or if colleges don't do what they want, or whatever group that takes federal money doesn't do what they want. If you stop taking money, they have very little control. Trump will have very little control over the states if the states stop taking the money. And you know what? This big, beautiful piece of shit bill made that much easier since it cut off so much of the money. You already lost a hell of a lot of money from the federal government. So why don't we just rip the Band-Aid off completely and say, take your money and shove it up your ass. And maybe we should start thinking about withholding money to the federal government. That's another thing we should be thinking about. But stop enslaving ourselves to this federal government by taking their money and then having to do what he says. Don't take it, he loses his power. Governors, attorneys general in the states, district attorneys, law enforcement in the states need to prosecute members of this administration, federal law enforcement, who are carrying out Donald Trump's illegal orders. Many of the things that they are doing in kidnapping people and assaulting people are crimes under state law. Prosecute these people for their crimes. We have the power to do that now. Look at all the things that we've seen these ICE agents do in California, that we've seen on video. Imagine how many things they've done that we haven't seen. Many of those things you've seen them do are crimes. They're not immune from those crimes just because they're federal law enforcement. Prosecute, arrest them and prosecute them. And what we all should be doing right now is we should be educating our fellow Americans as to what it is that they voted for. And Donald Trump has just, and Republicans have handed us in this big, beautiful piece of shit bill, a powerful weapon to use against them, because a lot of people are going to be harmed by this. We need to make sure these people know why they are being harmed. We need to blame everything wrong that happens in this country, everything bad, on Donald Trump and Republicans. That's the new rule. Talked about it right after the election, before he took office. That's the new rule. When Joe Biden was president, Trump blamed everything Anything that would go wrong anywhere in the world, he would blame on Joe Biden. Russia invades Ukraine, that's Joe Biden's fault. And on and on and on. Everything was Joe Biden's fault. Well, if that standard was good enough to apply to Biden, it's good enough to apply to Trump. It's his own damn standard. We need to be doing a better job of blaming him for everything wrong. And I frankly don't give a fuck whether he's responsible for it or not. They didn't give a damn whether Joe Biden was responsible for it or not. It is time to take off the damn gloves and start fighting back. And Democrats and you know, anyone on the pro-freedom side of the equation, anyone who is non-MAGA, we need to do a better job of going into these media spaces and making our case. You know, part of the reason we're in this position is because Republicans have always hated the mainstream media. They were far ahead of Democrats in hating the mainstream media. And so anytime there was a new technology, they took advantage of it. Podcasts and YouTube and talk radio and all of that stuff. They went into those areas. They utilized those technologies. Democrats sat back on their asses and just utilized the mainstream media for their news and information. Meanwhile, Republicans were taking over talk radio, taking over podcasts, taking over YouTube, taking over social media to push their bullshit lies and propaganda. They went around the mainstream media. And they created these infrastructures which now are so powerful and so important. And Democrats are behind the curve on this. They need to be making more inroads into those platforms, including you. You can do it too. You don't have to wait for someone else to do it. You got something to say? You want to help persuade your fellow Americans? Then you get into those spaces too. Anyway, it is time to fight back against this or we're going to lose it all. There's a lot we can do to start fighting back. And we need to be putting pressure on elected Democrats who have authority to start doing some of this stuff, to start doing it. I want to see arrests and prosecutions of these thugs wearing masks, carrying out Trump's illegal orders, kidnapping people, beating them. Those are crimes. Why are they being allowed to get away with it? We don't have to sit back and take this shit. All those crimes happening in California against residents of California, why aren't they being prosecuted? Demand that they are. Fight, or we're going to lose it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon.